Hey, good evening and welcome to the Trash Picture Show. This evening I am joined by the absolutely legendary and brilliant Mike Tharme, a craftsman at his peak in his craft, which is stop motion. If you haven't seen the prior streams that he's been on, he's a fucking salt of the earth bloke, absolute legend. But you know what? I'll let him give a bit of a rundown on who he is and what he does and how he does it so well. Mike, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, geez, so I have to. Right, so yes, as Marty explained, my name is Mike. I am a stop motion animator in Lancashire of England. For those of you who don't know where England is, it's that shitty little island somewhere in the northern hemisphere.
It was the place
Um,
that kept on fucking bullying us back in the fucking
yeah.
30s. Anyway, okay.
So I do stop motion animation. Specifically, I work in a company called Animation Toolkit that makes and fabricates stop motion armatures for stop motion puppets. So, as an example, this is something that we are currently working on at the moment. So, if you can't tell already, this would be an armature that would be inside a dinosaur, particularly Phil Tippett's early Jurassic Park stop motion puppets. So everything's jointed, everything's hinged, and the idea is that you would effectively cover those armatures with a material, whether it be foam latex, upholstery foam and latex, or even silicone. There's a number of ways people build their puppets using our armatures, and some of which have actually been people such as Peter Jackson's been one of our biggest clients so far. So can't argue with that too much. And yeah, King Kong is where it all started for me. Just like about 90% of every other special effects, stop motion, animation, just general cinephile. If you haven't seen King Kong at all, you cannot call yourself a cinephile.
No, you're not a film fan, and as Mike said before we came on, he's an icon. He's a cinematic icon. No Con, no Harryhausen, no Phil Tippett, no Jurassic Park. It's that much of an impact, and he is that important to the zeitgeist of cinema, particularly sci-fi and fantasy. The movie was the brainchild of Marion C. Cooper. Marion C. Cooper was a fucking one of those mad bastards at the early part of the 20th century. He was like a pilot, a filmmaker, an explorer. Essentially, Carl Denham is the insert
Yeah,
character, I think, for
yeah.
Marion C. Cooper. Um, Cooper's original idea to make King Kong probably wasn't the most, I don't know, humane or civilized or decent.
By our
Um,
standards today, yes.
yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
So, bit of a rundown. In the early days of cinema, and up until I think the 50s and 60s, and maybe even the 70s, there was a technique called Slurposaurus, where you basically got modern day lizards, shot them in a particular way that they looked bigger. I think possibly rear projection, right, Mike? That would have been the technique they would have used.
Most times it'd be rear projection, yeah.
Um, they would have, if they wanted them to look quote unquote more prehistoric, they would have glued shite onto them, fins, claws, horns. And Cooper's idea was to have a Komodo dragon fight a silverback gorilla. Now, he decided not to, not for altruistic reasons or humane reasons. Fuck no, the man wanted to make his movie. The Komodo dragons kept on dying in fucking transit. Komodo dragons are apparently very hard to animals to maintain. And if you can imagine back in the 1930s, do you think they would have been looked after? Fuck no. So that's, I think, Mike, that's when Willis O'Brien came into the picture. Tell us a bit about Willis O'Brien.
So Willis O'Brien, he started doing stop motion in the early 1900s. So originally he was a very commercial guy. He did every other kind of like odd job and such, but he was a very keen boxer. So when he was trying to pose a clay model of someone boxing, the idea was is that he was going to take a series of still photographs so that he could see each iteration of the poses. But what he accidentally discovered is that if you run the film through a camera, you can actually see this clay model animating. And he's one of the first pioneers, along with many other individuals throughout the globe. So there's not one person that is really the true father of animation in general, but he was one of the pioneers of stop motion animation. And he made a series of shorts which were involving dinosaurs and cavemen, and they were kind of like the very early silly symphonies of cinema. So you would have cavemen that would get into a situation with a dinosaur would retaliate and do whatever, a bit of comedy here and there, and then the short would finish. And some of them you can actually see on YouTube today. So there are some surviving films that have been uploaded. So if you are interested in seeing like the very first early stop motions of his career, then do check those out, because between the early 1900s and then going into the 1920s, that's when you get him working on the original Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. So at this point, this is where he had met Marcel Delgado, who made a lot of his dinosaur models. So Willis O'Brien would plan the armatures and the overall design. He'd hand those over to Marcel, and he would fabricate the armature and the actual muscle structure and the dinosaur textures to go on them. And the two of them, from what I understand from Ray's, they had a very good understanding of each other's work ethics. So when Kong came about, he brought Delgado back into it. But between 1925's 1925's Lost World and King Kong, O'Brien was working on a film called Creation, and the idea is that it was a bunch of explorers that got stranded on an island that was infested with dinosaurs, and they would have to find their way home. Unfortunately, he was struggling trying to find funds for this film. He'd only shot maybe a couple of test sequences, and when funding eventually fell through for it, Meryl C. Cooper stepped in and said, if you can make Kong, I'll then bring you into work. So a majority, if not all of the models you actually see in King Kong were originally supposed to be for Creation and ended up being carried over for, including some of the animals that weren't actually made into the production, like the Astereotherium. That was supposed to be something that was in Creation that ended up going into Kong, and then ultimately was just cut out.
So essentially, that would have been very beneficial, because they could have hit the ground running if the models were already made, right?
Exactly, that's right.
When,
Yeah.
When did Creation get cancelled? What was it, right before King Kong went into production, or maybe a few years
would
before?
imagine it was right before King Kong came into production. The way things worked in Hollywood back then, because the industry was still relatively new to the to the organizations. A lot of kind of like describe this. A lot of things that would go on either weren't by the book, or were verbal favors of people, or people would just kind of like lump things all together. And so it was very kind of like Wild West sort of scenario when it came to having projects like bleed into each other. Like one of the other good examples is that during Kong, there was another film, which I forget the name of off the top of my head, that was also starring Fay Ray and what was his name? Can't remember the name of the actor, but yeah. So they were both working on two films, both using the same set. So during the day they'd shoot one thing, and then during the night they'd shoot the other, all on the same set. So to anybody else, it'd be exactly the same. But if in today's market, if that was a Universal film under a 20th Century Fox studio thing, there'd be red tape and politics. And
That'd be a
them.
licensing nightmare.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I saw, I think you can see maybe a chunk of Creation on YouTube. One scene I do vividly remember is some prick shoots a little baby triceratops in the eye and kills it, and he gets trampled, rightly fucking so. So yeah, it looked cool. It looked very cool, and it makes sense that as well. I think that maybe. Do you think O'Brien tweaked some of the designs as well? That he made them, because the dinosaur designs for Creation look cool, but I think maybe he added a bit more detail before he started, or am I imagining things?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if you look at the Triceratops in the creation footage versus the Styracosaur that you saw in
Mm.
Son of Kong, which again was supposed to be in King Kong and got cut out, there's a noticeable texture difference between the two.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't surprise me if during the creation test footage, where either they had more money invested into it or O'Brien had a good feeling about the scripts that he would mention to Delgado about enhancing the overall texture of the dinosaurs to make them feel more realistic. Because don't forget, at this time, the only other film that people would have compared um, to have a realistic dinosaur on the screen would have been 1925's Lost World. So you're going from that quality of filmmaking, and of course we didn't have anything like um, video or DVDs or anything back in the early 20s. So people's uh, memory of 1925's film compared to then we've got the 1933
yeah.
film, it would be a vastly massive jump in digital effects, digital stop motion effects. There we go.
I like again. It's pretty cool. I keep in mind 1930s. One thing I noticed, and there is a lot of paleo inaccuracies with these movies, but there's also a lot of things that I think were a bit ahead of its time. The pteropod that Khan fights, uh, I know they call it a T-Rex. I think it has three fingers, but it has subtle bird-like movements. Maybe it was sheer happenstance or happy accident,
Mm,
but there was, yes, it still had the kind of the dragging tail and the upright
mm,
stance, but there was something bird-like in its movements.
mm.
um would O'Brien maybe have studied other animals in order to
Oh yeah,
kind of map
absolutely.
out a movement?
Yeah, yeah. No, he absolutely would have done. I mean, as you were saying, that in terms of today's standards, they are very inaccurate. But at the time, considering that T-Rex had only been discovered in 1900, this creature had only been in people's awareness for 20 years, sorry, for 30 years. So there was a lot of inaccuracies that they were based on with mapping the T-Rex skeletons that they had, which were all impartial. So they didn't know even that if T-Rex had two fingers or three fingers until I think the 1970s, and that's when it finally got confirmed that they actually had two fingers. So O'Brien based a lot of his designs on the work of Charles R. Knight. So if you look at Charles R. Knight's work versus what O'Brien's done, you can see a lot of similarities in terms of like the postures, the way they looked, the way that they behaved. Even I think there was forgot the name of the painting, but there's the painting that Charles did of two leaping theropods that were in a battle with each other. And to a certain extent, you can see that sort of like warm bloodedness in
Mhm.
the T Rex fight. It's not a lumbering thing that's just kind of like slowly plodding along. It's literally lashing out. It's jumping. It's running up to Kong. So there's a lot of activity there, and people need to remember as well that when you see things that are based on older movies, and it's like, like the Jurassic Park movies at the time, they were
Yeah,
everything there was paleo accurate. We've now gone past that point to the point where it's like, well, yeah, they're not right anymore. But then this is one of those cultural significances that I mentioned in our offline chat, is that each film is documenting everything that is going on in that period in time. So not only are we getting kind of like these dawn of special effects, we're also getting a good visual representation of how people thought dinosaurs were, just as much as where we look at the statues in Crystal Park and realize that's what the Victorians thought dinosaurs were. So it's lovely little bits like that. So people should never look at it back on it as a negative. They should look at it with a fondness about, yeah, that's how we used to think about things, but then it's changed, kind of like how we look at the human body now compared to what we did 100 years ago. So it's everything's interesting in that sense.
it's the kind of scientific standard that as we
Mm,
progress as a society, like our advancement is quicker and quicker. Medicine gets quicker
yeah.
and quicker.
Mm,
Cures for diseases are found quicker and quicker. So it
mm,
again, it's that. But again, as you said, there is something there is something joyous about seeing the old designs and what people felt
Yeah.
that these creatures look like. Again,
Yeah.
may not be scientifically accurate, but for the time, it was. And
Yeah.
again, outdated ideas, but I think for the time, cutting edge, and the fact O'Brien, yes, they were monstrous, but he did lend an animalistic, a more
Mhm.
terrestrial,
Yeah.
animalistic vibe
Yeah.
to these creatures.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a rundown, and unless you've been hiding on a fucking rock or shot into fucking space, King Kong essentially focuses on the Venture, the crew of the Venture, traveling to Skull Island, and you have Robert Armstrong. I'm just gonna Bruce Cabot, Robert Armstrong, and obviously Fay Ray, and they're going to shoot a picture. And again, this is essentially a biopic for Marion C. Cooper if dinosaurs fucking existed. And yeah, he plays Carl Denham. Armstrong plays Carl Denham, and he finds out about this mysterious Skull Island. He travels there. He takes his crew with him. Andaro, Ferrey's Andaro is captured by the natives. If you're I need to put a big thing. If you're going to watch this, do not watch it with modern sensibilities. Do not watch it with modern sensibilities in relation to the tribe, and do not watch it with modern sensibilities in, in relation to the cook, the ship's cook. Okay, that's what I will tell you. That's what I will warn you. That's your trigger.
It's a film of its time. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, 1933, guys. So just to warn you. So the tribesmen kidnap Fay Ray. They put her as a sacrifice for their deity, who's kept behind a giant wall, and turns out to be this very large, horny fucking primate. And he takes her into the jungle. The crew pursue to save our heroine, and they encounter a menagerie of prehistoric nightmares. What's your thoughts on the setup for the movie, Mike?
Absolutely love it. To me, this is the best gateway movie to science fiction, fantasy, and even horror to a certain extent. The pacing is on point. The dialogue isn't overly complicated, if not somewhat silly in some scenes. And the action, when it hits, you get revved up from 0 to 100 in literally 5 minutes. And after that point, there is no slowing down. I don't even recall anything slowing down until we literally get back to New York, and then it ramps back up again. So there's
it's frenetic. It's got a great pace to it. As well as Willis O'Brien's fantastic stop motion, there was also a large, I suppose, animatronic or robot, or what would you have called
animatronic? Yeah.
And I love it, but it looks a bit goofy when you get a close up. But I still love it. It's just he's just like, hey.
Yeah, it's not like you could go back to today's standards where it's like when you understand how mechanics work and the way gears work, and you've got servos and stuff that are just tiny little things. This was back in the day when this thing was being hauled around on a giant wagon, so it's not even like they could just like stick it on a small trolley or something. But credit where credit's due. It's like if you're going to do something big, you might as well do it big and bold. So it's they definitely left the mark on people.
Question for you, and we'll get into the creatures because that's, I know you're chomping at the bit, and people who are watching might be chomping at the bit to discuss. I definitely prefer, and I don't hate him. I definitely prefer the Robert Armstrong, Carl Denham in this to Jack Black, because I genuinely feel this Carl Denham, he's reckless, but he's not a fucking sociopath or a narcissist that Jack Black is. Jack Black, if you've seen the Peter Jackson, that fucking, he's borderline evil in that. He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, save the cameras! Save people are getting
Yeah.
eaten." And you prick. No, in fairness, Robert Armstrong's Carl Denham, when that fucking Stegosaurus comes charging, he's like, "Fuck that shit."
Yeah.
Speaking of, give me 1 second, Mike. What did you think? Which Carl Denham do you prefer?
Again, I prefer Robert Armstrong's version. As much as I like Pete Jackson, as much as I like Jack Black as an actor, I thought his portrayal of Jack Black, and I don't know whether this is Peter Jackson's direction or just kind of like Jack Black trying to envision himself in the time, because that was the positive and the negative with 2005's remake is that it was set in the 1930s realistically, whereas this is a glamorized version of 1930s New York.
Yeah.
So the original, yes, it showed that they were in the Depression. Yes, it showed that women were queuing up around the block to have soup for an evening meal. But that was kind of like the extent of it. We didn't see much past that point. But in Jackson's version, you saw that everyone was basically out for themselves because of the Depression. People's attitudes to one another were very like, well, if this is going to cost us money, we ain't doing it. Even in terms of Jack as a filmmaker at this period, you could see the tension on his face and says, if I don't get this film sorted, I am going to lose everything. Whereas Carl Denham in the original, it was a case of, I'm going to bring this beast back to the New York and I'm going to show the world. There was a kind of like a joyous, childlike mentality behind it. Whereas, yeah, Jax was just kind of like, yeah, I need to get this done, otherwise I'm done.
Yeah,
And I liked it, but it's very different.
I don't think either character is evil, but I definitely think if I had to say who was more of the fucking Melvoint of the two, I'm going to say Jack Black.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so our heroes go through the massive wall that's dividing the jungle from the natives and the shore. And the first animal they encounter is a Stegosaurus. Now, just a heads up, this is a publicity still. This isn't anything from the movie. Thoughts on the Stegosaurus, Mike?
Absolutely love it. I don't care if it's wrong. I don't care if it's stumping. I don't care that it took literally 2 grenades to the face and then got shot in the eye. It was brilliant. I love it.
It's cool. It's good. And do you know what? One thing I like about Con as well, and okay, maybe this is inaccurate or not inaccurate. This movie makes herbivores dangerous. These are still
Absolutely.
big animals, and you
Yeah.
piss off a cow or a horse, it'll fuck you up. Can you imagine something like this?
Yeah.
I liked as well the fact it charged. It was, I don't know who it was. I think there was an interview done. It might have been Phil Tippett or someone else. And he was talking about this scene. And he loved this scene. He theorized that this was a bull Stegosaurus defending its territory. And again, like I like that's something that's missing. Like the Jurassic Park movies. Oh, the gentle herbivores, they're so nice. No, one of these things gets fucking spooked. You're fucking pancaked, mate.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? What do you think about the idea of the herbivores being just as dangerous as the fucking carnivores?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, okay. The herbivores, they have no intention of eating anybody, compared to the brontosaurus that we see later on. But in terms of the threat, I mean, even the size of them is like over exaggerated. I mean, with the Stegosaurus in this, its head could easily overshadow a basic human, especially when you see them walking alongside the Stegosaurus corpse. That head was huge. So even if it wasn't going to kill these people for food, it was definitely going to like make an absolute show out of their corpses.
Oh yeah, no,
But,
again.
yeah, I absolutely love it. I really love it. I mean, considering as well, it's the first creature you come across, and there's no kind of, is it going to attack? Oh, we'll just let it slumber away. It just literally just snaps, and it's full throttle. Like I said before, it goes from 0 to 100 in those first 5 minutes. It's just like, yeah it's gone.
You're fucked. You're pancaked. I I kind of enjoyed the homage, or it was cut out of the regular edition. But in the Jackson version, the extended Jackson version, they use some kind of ceratopsian. I think they call it fructus ceratops or something like that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's in a briar patch or something. Eh, there's something about this that's just cooler. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Hey, we have Larry, aka the horror cat dad, in the chat. Hey, Larry, how you doing? Any final thoughts before we move on to the next monstrosity, or is there anything you want to discuss about this scene?
So there's two things that I was really hoping for with this. In the Lost World, sorry, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, there was a deleted scene with a massive Stegosaurus corpse. And I was really hoping that this was a little homage to King Kong, as the Jurassic movies have always paid homage to King Kong in some form or another. And I managed to ask one of the sculptors that worked on the design of it, and I asked them, was it a homage because of it being so huge? I mean, literally one person was stood on its back, and the plate sail was just as big as what it would have been if the stop motion puppet was scaled up to someone in real life. And they said, no, the director told us that it's either you go big or go home. So it wasn't even a genuine
For
reference
fuck.
to King Kong. So it's like, for God's sake, it's like the perfect opportunity to do this. You can balls it up that way. So there's
Like,
that.
like as you said before, if you've watched Jurassic Park, the gates to the park, that's a nod. Lost World Jurassic Park, the ship is called the fucking Venture, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
The riverboat attack, I think that's obviously a nod to the Jurassic Park novel, but I also like to think it's a nod to the attack in this. Again, we have so much to owe King Kong in cinema for.
So just one more thing, sorry, before we go. On this still, if you look on the floor, can you see what's hidden there?
Give me 1 second, Mike, and I'll see if I can
Zoom in a bit.
I can't zoom in anymore. Which side, left or right?
So basically, where Kong and Stegosaurus' feet are.
Yep.
Yep. So you see all that surface area there that they stood on.
Yep.
That's the animation table. That's not even ground. So literally, the entire set of Kong is literally just a pegboard.
That's brilliant.
So in some scenes you can kind of see it, but they're very clever about how they hide it, especially when they're doing like rear projection stuff. They just cover the entire bottom of the screen with
I noticed that. I noticed
table.
they put a shitload of foliage and kind of greeneries and stuff with the rear projection. That is, and again, that's Mike. Mike knows his stuff when it comes to stop motion. But yeah, Stegosaurus kicked arse. Probably a cool introduction to the dinosaurs. And again, it's showing, hey, these things might eat fucking greens, but they'll still fucking stomp your arse out. The next animal we encounter, apologies about this, Mike. Where are you hiding? There we go. Share. I couldn't get a better picture, but there we go. Hang on.
It's a very big model to photograph, so yeah, you will struggle to find decent photos of this.
So another pissed off herbivore, the classic Bronto. This I think takes a bit of liberties with it eating the sailor, but I suppose as well he's up in a tree. The thing's pissed off. Fuck it, I'll gum you to death. I'll fucking chew you up and spit you out, literally. What did you think of this scene? Do you think they went a bit too far with it, or again, does it work for the whole pissed off herbivore thing?
Absolutely works. I mean, the attack sequence in the actual lake itself, I prefer over the ground chase. However, in saying that, I love the stupidity of the sailor that is like, this thing's very, very tall, therefore I'm going to put myself at a convenient biting height.
Hey,
rather than just kept running or hiding in a bush or something.
maybe he should have been in a high hide. That's a fucking Jurassic Park nerdy joke. But is there any little tidbits or any secrets or anything you wanted to talk about this guy? Is there anything
Yeah,
that
no,
is of
there is.
interest?
So the first time that we see it, it's actually a miniature animatronic puppet. And when I say the term animatronic, I'm talking like very primitive rod puppet, cables moving, basic stuff. So we're not talking radio control here, just in case anyone's like, they didn't have animatronics back in 1930. It's like, yeah, I remember. So the first time we see it, it's an animatronic puppet that was operated underwater by a diver. And then when it transitions into a stop motion sequence, O'Brien would film it through a frosted pane of glass. So you have the actors running in front, and to be able to catch that mist effect, the frosted glass would affect and diffuse the actual model going through. And being as big as it was when you're seeing it being shot up close, that was the overall size of the model. That's just so difficult to keep in focus at all the time. And for this sequence, it's the first time we ever see what is later referred to as the animator's touch, which is extended from O'Brien to Harryhausen to Phil Tippett and various other people after that, where you have a live action actor that is seen running to a certain point, disappears behind something, and then emerges as a stop motion puppet to be able to interact with the actual stop motion puppet Brontosaur.
Yeah, that was cool as well. It's not seamless. Obviously, it's not going to be seamless, but it was a cool little technique where like the guy actor runs behind a tree and comes out the other side. And he's little Gumby fucking plasticine man, and he gets eaten. But yeah, again, that it's fucking scary as well. I'll still give leeway to it. Again, it's like fuck it. Humans up in a tree. It's pissing me off. Suppose I'll just fucking munch it and spit it out. Like 1933. These are as we said before. Hey, Pugwall. Thanks, man. It's all Mike. It's all fucking Mike. I'm just fucking yammering. But again, they do monsterfy these creatures. They do keep one foot in the kind of animal kingdom, but they've definitely monsterfied them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, this film was shot with the idea to shock and horrify people. So you're not going to get that if you're just walking past this lumbering beast that's just eating nothing but vegetation. Especially when you think about the effect that this is effectively a snake on a elephant's body, and there's nothing more terrifying than having a serpentine head just weaving around trying to strike you. So, and the scene where you're actually looking at the sailor on the tree with the brontosaur's head kind of like swaying back and forth, that's a rear projection shot. But even though you know that that's a stop motion puppet and he's a real actor reacting to this thing on screen, with the music score being as intense as it is, and his screams, and he's just kind of panics, doesn't know what to do, and the thing's just darting around. It's terrifying. It really is. I mean, especially if you're a young child. I was about 5 years old when I first watched Kong, and that scene, it was like my eyes just could not look away from the screen. But I vividly remember that my fingers were digging into the sofa at the same time.
It's like, oh fuck. Dippy Diplodocus has gotten fucking. He's on drugs. He's on meth. Dippy's on meth. But yeah, no, another cool scene. And as Mike said, for 1933, this is basically a horror movie as well. There is some fucking horrific deaths in this. So we're going to move on, and I think if we move on to a classic scene, I'm going to leave the big man to last. And we'll discuss him. We'll discuss the man of the hour at the end, because I know there's stuff with like the hair, the thumbprints through the hair and stuff. I know you'll want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the scene that everyone remembers, and it's this one here. This is the money shot. Christ Almighty! Like, how the fuck was this done back in the day? Because this was no small feat.
And to be fair with you, the only reason this film got greenlit for funding is because of this scene. So during the fight, there is a snippet where Kong flips the T-Rex on its back. The T-Rex then gets up, they share a bit of a jostle, and then they knock the tree down with Fay Ray in it. That particular sequence was the test footage that they showed to investors, and because they were so impressed by that, they literally said, do it. Here's the money, do it. So even though it's a bit of a goof in there because the Kong and the Rex do actually stop mid-fall of the tree sequence, the fact that it was that good of a test sequence that they put it into the film, it just, you don't get that these days. You really don't get that.
So essentially, this is the scene that sold the movie to investors.
Yeah,
as you said.
Yeah.
You've worked. You were a stop motion artist yourself. Is there an added kind of difficulty to having to animate two models at the same time? Would there have been issues with that?
Yeah,
What?
Absolutely. I mean, these puppets, if you've seen the original armature for King Kong, the T-Rex was a little bit bigger. And if you've seen the making of Peter Jackson's, what do you call it now? Insect pit sequence, where they utilised a lot of the stop motion puppets for remaking him. The original Styracosaurus that they had for that film, you're talking about this sort of dimensions by this tall. So that's just one of the shorter models. The T-Rex, probably talking about so tall. If you actually pause some of the scenes where the fight sequence is going on, O'Brien actually had to put rods underneath the T-Rex to support the weight of not just the T-Rex, but also having Kong on its back. So you're talking about having two steel armatures that are heavily plastered in latex and cottons that are being very poorly supported by the feet, because don't forget, this is very early stop motion. There's no kind of like understanding of, okay, we need to use X parts to do this, or this material to make this lighter. This was all kind of like done with the technology and the techniques that have been established at this point for the best part of 100 years already. So there was a massive difficulty with this, and the chances are that these, from what I understood from Ray, these were quite stiff to move. So we're not talking, with this armature, for example, you don't need to put too much effort into it to be able to move it. Whereas what they were probably doing is grabbing it by the head and really pushing all their weight into moving these joints. And some of the joints would have been huge on these things, because again, we're talking about certain technologies being available where you could have done small and finer joints, but that would have meant time, that would have meant money, and that would have meant skills. And if one of those three wasn't in that sequence, then it just wasn't there.
Like, as you said before, these things would have weighed a fucking ton, and to have to manipulate them while they're interlocked. Like, here's me with my fucking action figures doing my shitty little stop motion stuff, and I'm like, I'm putting down like half a fucking ounce of blue tack to keep the fucker standing, and these two huge things. Also, hello to some people that came into chat. My gorgeous girlfriend came in. Also, we have a bunch of other awesome people coming in. Worms T17 and Creepy McGee, who is a longtime viewer. And yeah, again, did this, like, what would have been the other issues? Because again, manipulating these two big fuckers would like. What are the issues you have to deal with today, and then compound that on top of 1933 fucking thinking? What would have been the other
So
kind of?
the biggest issue that they would have had at the time is making sure that every animation sequence that was shot was one, it was fluid in movement, and I say that lightly. Fluid for the time in 1933 is exactly what we saw on the screen. You couldn't get more finesse than that. But also, if something went wrong, say for example a light bulb had gone out, they wouldn't find out about that until they'd finished the shot, they'd taken it to the developers, they brought it back for the rushes, and screened it to the director and producers. In those days, something like that could have taken anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks. So if you finish the shot, you're then jumping onto something else, and then you get a call from the director saying, "This scene fucked up, we need to reshoot it." You're absolutely screwed, basically. So a lot of the time, these sets were running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were having tests on the lighting to make sure everything was fine. They were making sure that nobody came in the vicinity of the set for disturbance. So things like hot set is used quite frequently in animated films now, and it probably would have extended from films like this. But also, a majority of the set dressing was just lichen, twigs, and stones. So if you knocked one of those plants during a shot, you could see that in the animation. So it's the same issue with Kong's fur, with the animator moving the fur around with his fingers to move the puppet. You'd be having set dressing dancing all over the place. And in certain sequences, you can see that, but because you've got such an active in, an active scene going on anyway, you kind of put it down to, oh well, it's moving because the T-Rex tail's wafted some draft or something. But realistically, you're probably talking about, the animator just moving in and making a small mistake, which then just carries through to the rest of the film. And the chances of them reshooting any of this as well is probably very minimum, just on the basis of one, it's time to set up, two, it's money to set up, and three, it's if you've set a deadline for having the film released in August of 1933, and it's September, not September, February of 1933, you can't afford that time to reschedule. You can't just announce, oh yeah, we're going to postpone the movie like they do sometimes these days. But yeah, you hit a deadline, you've got to hit a deadline.
Did I hear you right in saying this battle sequence 1 to 3 weeks, or would that have been, how long do you think it would have taken to film this scene alone?
It's really difficult to tell. That's something I never asked Ray about, if he ever found that off Willis himself. But from the amount of work that goes into it, I would have said this is probably maybe a good couple of weeks, maybe even more than a month to shoot this. So we're not even talking just animating it. We're talking about set dressing. We're talking about lighting. We're talking about setting the camera up right. I mean, don't forget that the test sequence that they had before, it wouldn't surprise me if the test sequence was shot first. They left everything where it was, and then when everything was green lit, this was probably the first thing that they shot because they already had the set laid out already. That would be my way of looking at it.
Okay. Again, it's as, and it makes totally sense as you said, Mike. This is the scene that sold the movie. Is there anything about this design or look of the theropod that you enjoy, or anything you don't like, or anything that you think kind of stands out that maybe modern interpretations could learn from?
Not really. I mean, the one thing that I was actually quite surprised about when I looked back over this is, do you remember when there was that massive debate in recent years about whether T-Rex had lips or not?
Yeah.
So every film that O'Brien had made dinosaurs for, they all had lips, because in the animal kingdom, lizards have lips, crocodiles kind of have lips to a certain extent, if you exclude the exposed teeth, but the mouth closes shut. There's no kind of like way through the mouth per se. And then it's only within probably recent decades, probably from the 1970s, maybe even the 1960s onwards, that dinosaurs have been portrayed without lips. So
That's
culturally,
shrink wrapping though, right? That's the whole shrink wrapping thing.
no. So shrink wrapping is where they basically take a skeleton, draw a line around the whole skeleton, and then say, right, this is how thick the body mass was.
Hmm.
You've got, say, don't know how well you can see. So all the dinosaur skeletons that you see on the wall over here. So basically, say with the Diplodocus that's there, the neck was only as thick as what the bones were.
Yeah.
So that is shrink wrapping. But what they don't take into account for is things like body fat, muscle mass, what the neck could actually do versus what we think it could do. So, like the plesiosaurs of the Jurassic Seas, everyone always depicts them as having really snake-like heads, heads and neck movements, whereas realistically, their necks and heads could only move at a slight elevation, so they couldn't do any kind of like quick whip rounds or
I
anything like that.
I know that the shrink wrapping is to go by the bones and stuff, but
Mm,
would that whole, which I still think is bollocks, that like you don't think an animal that big has fat. It's going to have fat. It's
mm,
going to have
yeah.
skin and jowls and stuff. I thought that might have been a knock-on effect to why dinosaurs, modern interpretations of dinosaurs, don't have lips. The whole fucking shrink wrapping. Do you think that,
No,
or
I mean, it's more kind of like kind of the same way how you always had teeth in a certain way, but then since Peter Jackson's King Kong with the V-Rexes having the dentistry that they have, suddenly you're seeing that kind of like influence bleed out into other
in the
creatures.
Indominus?
So exactly. So it's kind of like once something kind of like becomes mainstream in people's minds, the moment someone does something new, that's when it goes back to, oh, okay, so this is how they're depicted now. So it just kind of like has a domino effect. So we're always going to be having this uh, um, dialogue, whether it be paleo accuracy or fantasy design or whatever, where things are going to come back and forth from something that we've seen 100 years ago to something that's probably not going to be seen for the next 100 years. But it's just the way media works, and especially how people's consciousness, when they're influenced by something, will then be transpired, and then it gets influenced by other people, and then they get influenced, and they get influenced beyond that. So yeah.
I totally detracted you. You were given a whole. You were going to give your theory on the lips. Why they've stopped doing
Yes.
lips?
So I was really happy to see that when people said that dinosaurs have never had lips in media, it's like actually they did. So we've just forgotten about it. That's all, because we're talking about something that is nearly over 100 years old now. I absolutely love the stance. I've always been a passionate person for kind of like having the kangaroo stance in theropods. To quote Ray, when I spoke to him about what does he think about modern dinosaur interpretations now, they all look constipated because they all keep the tails up in the air. Which I can see it. I can see it. So yeah, no, I know it's scientifically accurate, and I understand that tails there for balance. But to me, there's just something primordial about seeing something in kind of like a squatted kangaroo stance. The only
It's
thing I was a little bit like
it
not sure about, but it kind of grows on me. But again, it's like one of those things of, because you know where the references come from, and then you're seeing the interpretation is the feet. They're very kind of like that. I forget the correct term for it, but it's basically just kind of like it's three prongs. You've got a toe going forward, and you've got two toes going either side. It's not even like they're
like an
pressed
anchor.
together or
It's
splayed out.
like a
Yeah,
fucking
exactly.
anchor.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, that could be down to that was the best way to have the puppet standing up, but at the same time, it's like I just no.
yeah. Again, it's like as you said before. It's 1933. We're not going to be
Yeah,
fucking. Well, I do again. Not paleo. I like the stance. It's a brawler
mm,
stance. It's like
yeah,
fuck it. I'm gonna fucking come on. Come on, it's just
yeah,
this fucking. It's like a little pissed off lad you'd see in the pub, just
yeah,
hunched over.
yeah.
It's like, come on. But yeah, no. Again, kick-ass fight, and
Mhm.
as you've said, this is what sold the movie. Moving on. So we're going to be taking a bit of a deviation. We're not going to be talking about creatures that featured in the movie. Next, we're going to be talking about 2 scenes where creatures didn't feature in. And the first one is the lead up to the famous last scene. And it is, give me 2 seconds. Jesus, I really am. I apologize, Mike. I really am shit
Don't
at this.
apologize. It's internet, baby.
So it's this scene I am excited for. Now this is concept art. There is an actual model, and I'll show you the picture. So there's obviously the lost spider pit scene, and everyone and their fucking grandmother knows about the lost spiders pit scene. The scene I would love to see, and you can see it online, is the Arsenitarium. Although I think it's a Strachosaur that replaced it, and then the scene was dropped. Mike, what do you know about this scene, and what can you tell us about this scene?
So, as I said before, this was one of O'Brien's leftover creatures from his failed feature creation. So the idea is that the Arsenitarium was going to chase the sailors onto the log and then have Kong on the other side of the log, which is why they basically don't leave the log. If you're being chased by a gorilla on one side, you would think they're just going to bolt it over to the other side. Unfortunately, they decided to cut the scene in favor of using a Styracosaurus. And I think that was mainly down to the fact that up until this point, you hadn't seen any other kind of like prehistoric mammals. So it might have been a decision to say, right, okay, well, we'll just keep it all dinosaurs and it'll make it a bit easier. But even then, the Styracosaurus wasn't even safe from that chopping block. And yeah, they just decided to completely erase it from the production, unfortunately. Luckily enough, they still had the model for using in Son of Kong, and the model is now in Peter Jackson's private collection, so it still exists today. And again, if you look at the making of the Spider Pit sequence in Peter Jackson's stop motion homage to the Spider Pit sequence, it's a big puppet. I mean, the skull in itself is hand carved wood, so it's not even light material by any stretch. Yeah, it's a beast of a puppet.
If they had kept one of the 2 scenes, which would you have preferred? This scene, if they'd kept one of the creatures for the scene, which would you have preferred?
My heart is always leaning towards Styracosaurus, but there's another part of me that thinks that looking at the design that Delgado had made for O'Brien, I would have loved to have seen this being animated. It's like now I've seen the Styracosaurus animated, it's fine, but I want to see this animated now.
I'm with you. I think this creature, I can't pronounce the fucking thing. I'm trying. It sounds like I'm saying Arsenitarium. But I just like the idea of a Pliocene mammal on this island as well. Pleistocene mammal, because we've got enough dinosaurs. I like the idea. It just shows how insane the ecosystem on this fucking island is.
Yeah.
It's not just dinosaurs. It's not just Khan. There's shit from all over the kind of gaff. And there's those 2 big fucking off horns and stuff. They just look badass. Was there... This was a casualty of these... Was this a casualty of the spider scene removal? Spider pit scene removal? Or was this...
So there was... When I think the plans were that they were going to shoot it. I don't know if they were actually shot anything per se, because this is all linked in with the spider pit sequence, whether it was actually shot or not anyway. And according to reports of the time, and these are reports that are coming from Cooper himself, so there's a massive kind of like inconsistency with some of the things that he has reportedly said. One of the main things is that he said that we showed the sequence to test audiences, and they said the scene felt like the story had just stopped dead in its tracks. Now, I don't know personally if any of the sequence have been shot for the Spider Pit sequence, it kind of feels like there might have been footage that was shot for the other side of the ravine, but then because filming would have been a lot quicker than animation, they might have told the actors on the log, right, you're going to have a Kong on this side, you're going to have a creature on this side. Now react as if you're fighting from either direction. And if they've been told that, but then 6 months later the animation hasn't been shot, then you can't go back and you could go back and reshoot the actors reacting to nothing, but then you're going to have to change the script so it all writes in itself. And again, time is money when it comes to Hollywood. So yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if the sequence wasn't shot, but yeah, when it comes down to the spider pit sequence, that's one of those urban legends of it's in someone's attic, it got destroyed in a fire, it never got shot.
It's an assault mine in Transylvania or some fucking crazy shit
yeah,
like that.
exactly. It's in Grandma's attic from Las Vegas. There's just so many kind of like stories about this sequence, and in some ways that's made it more infamous than what it actually is. And I mean, even if it was never shot and it was just dropped because they didn't have the time to do it or something, that sequence alone is probably the one thing that, if you think about it in your head, judging by the script that people have read and seen some of these images, that would have been a bloody nightmare.
It would, again, again. Do you think another reason might have been, spitball a couple of reasons you think that, as you said, it might have been money wise or a nightmare to animate,
Yeah,
or too scary for audiences at the time?
I don't think so. In terms of films of that time, they didn't have certificates. They made a film, and they made a film that told a story. Granted, they would never
Yeah,
do
this was
back in the,
Mike. This was pre Hays Code as well, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
pre Hays Code.
So you know, kids of a young age could go watch this. I mean, Ray was 13 when he saw this. If you were to make this film now, it probably would have been probably close to a 15, I would reckon, if you'd done
Yeah,
it like this, but the way that we shoot things now. Um, but I don't think that they would have not filmed it because it would have been too scary. Because there are some things in films of that time where, okay, it's in black and white, but the way that they shot a lot of things was kind of like it was a mental thing rather than it's a shock and gore thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if they would have gone ahead with shooting this. But I honestly think the reason they didn't shoot it, if they hadn't shot it at all, is budget and time. Because we're talking about a lot of creatures down here with a lot of limbs, and the more limbs you've got on something, the longer it takes to animate it. Animating a person walking from left to right on a screen, you could probably get done in the best part of the day. Animating a spider that's got to go forwards a few steps, you're animating 8 individual limbs that have 3 joints of articulation on each leg. That's a lot of joints to move, and if you cock it up, you can't go up and reshoot that.
yeah. It would be a bastard to animate, especially
Mhm.
as you said, creepy crawlies with multiple limbs. I love the fact that there's people that are out there now. There's cheeky fuckers who have edited this into copies of King Kong and put it up online and said, "Oh, I found the
Yeah,
loss. It's the Peter Jackson. It's the Peter
yeah,
Jackson version of it." And
yeah.
I'm not tooting my own horn, but I watched what Peter Jackson had done, and like you can kind of tell it doesn't pass muster for the 1930s kind of. It's a bit
Mhm.
too. It's still more slick than the original
Yeah,
kind of style.
yeah,
What
yeah.
what do you think of Jackson's kind of little kind of tribute or recreation?
I do like it. I mean, the amount of the extent of research that they did into it was, you know, pretty top par. I mean, they could have just said, okay, we're going to do a spider pit sequence. We're going to have a bunch of spiders, a bunch of this and a bunch of that, and that's it. But they actually went into the script. They figured out what sequence of events went through, how many sailors survived, and what each of the sailors would have been devoured by. So the amount of research that went into it was really nicely done, and the fact that they actually kept it all stop motion as well was an equal bigger excuse me, victory in my sense, because they could have just done the whole thing CG. I mean, it was done by Weta Digital. They could have just literally said, "Sorry, we'll do it in the computer and make it look stop motion." But they built the puppets. They researched the puppets. They went into deep X-rays of the armatures and the models that they did have to compare them, and even going through footage of different films where the puppets that had been kept by RKO would have been reused set dressing in various other horror films at the time.
Did some of these guys end up in Black Scorpion? Actually, I wonder.
I thought that they did, but according to some of my friends online that have actually spoken with Marcel when he was alive and who knew Obi when he was alive as well, they all suggest that it was that they were inspired by them, but they weren't replicated. Because the way I looked at it, it seemed very convenient that you had 1933's King Kong with insects that were never shot, and then in the 1950s you had the Black Scorpion with an array of different insects. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think they were the same ones.
Yeah, no. It's just again, it's a cool sequence that never was, in theory.
Mm.
And I don't know if you can see him in the back there, and he does make it onto the screen. We get what I call the proto skull crawler that goes up after Jack Driscoll. Essentially a two-legged lizard that kind of we see in Con Skull Island, a modern take in Skull Island. What do you think of that little fucking thing climbing up after Jack Driscoll?
Well, I'll tell you
It's
now,
silly or
that's not
cool?
that
What?
that lizard is not the same lizard. That's a different lizard.
Oh fuck!
So it looks the same, but it's completely different. And I'll tell you how I know this, because the original armature for that two-legged lizard thing still exists, and the facial structure of the skull is different to what we see there.
Okay, because
And the
yeah,
thing is tiny.
it's a
It's like
longer
you can fit
snout.
it in the palm of your hand.
It's a longer snout on the one that goes after
Yeah.
Driscoll, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it also, and strangely enough as well, it has tusks that come down as well. So, but you can't see it because it's coming up from you basically shooting the whole thing from on above its head, so you can't see any of those details.
You're fucking right, because NECA, when they done the creature pack, the black and white creature pack, the Pteranodon, and that was included with it.
Yeah,
Oh fuck yeah. Weird, but again, it's part of the menagerie from the pit.
yeah,
Weird design,
yeah.
cool design. Your thoughts on what it is,
I
or
like
what?
it. I honestly like it. I like the best thing that I like about the spider pit sequencing from the descriptions is that these are almost like otherworldly creatures that don't belong anywhere but hell. And if you go in on Skull Island, which is practically hell already with dinosaurs everywhere, then you've got these insectoid monstrosities at the bottom of a pit that you've got no way out. And the only way to leave such a place is literally in the jaws of a thing that you just can't even describe. I mean, some of those descriptions were like octopus tentacles on a spider body, and it's just, yeah, it's just nightmarish to think about.
There's a brilliant, and I know it's in relation to the Peter Jackson movie, but there's a brilliant quote in the Natural History of Skull Island. Exploring that pit was like turning over stones in Hades. I love that quote. I love that fucking
Yes,
quote. That's a
yes.
brilliant fucking quote. But yeah, again, legendary sequence. I think, I think in some cases more people know about the Lost Spider Pit sequence than they know about Son of Khan existing
Yeah,
at this fucking
yeah.
stage. So we're going to move on to another creature, and this chappy here, the Elasmosaurus, I think. Or am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Elasmosaurus, that's right, yeah.
So it's a plesiosaur. It's some form of plesiosaur, right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Thoughts a bit too fantastical, not fantastical enough.
It's of its time, and again, this is what I was saying before about where people assumed because they had these long necks that they were very serpentine. So O'Brien has gone very much kind of like the sea serpent route with this particular creature. Um, but it didn't last very long in the film, which is a shame because I did like the fact that it was a constrictor. It was literally trying to choke Kong before basically Kong does this fantastic whip and crack on the bloody floor with its head. It was just amazing to watch. And again, you're talking about something that's really long, that's going to be really difficult to support in animation. So that was amazing. But what I also like about this scene is that you've got about a good chunk of effects that have all been accumulated in this film into one set. So not only do you have rear projection of Fay Ray in the background, you've got a rear projection of Jack Driscoll in the foreground. You've also got a live action plate of the link where the Elasmosaurus starts off. You've got a forward plate of steam rising from the vent. You've got the animation set with Kong, and then you've also got the back plate, not back plate, sorry, the rear background of the matte painting for the back of the chasm. So you've got about 5 or 6 different layers going on all at once.
That must have been an absolute fucking bollocks to put together or try and. Yeah. Oh Jesus! Yeah, that would have been a fucking sequence and a half.
If you had something that would have been classed as kind of like the money shot for techniques, that scene would have been it.
So the Con and Rex fight is the fucking selling point. But this for you, is this the highlight of the movie?
This is the highlight, absolutely. This is like literally taking all the known effects at that time and placing it into one sequence. And half the time you can be watching this sequence, but because you're so focused on Kong fighting the Elasmosaur, you forget all these other elements are going on. I mean, I didn't even realize that the lake that the Elasmosaur was swimming in was actually water to begin with. I thought it was just like a lava pool or something. So it wasn't until I actually realized and saw the head swimming around. It's like, oh my God, that's actually live action. Wow. That's not even like animated. It is literally someone's photographed a live action plate of a head being swimming around.
Jesus. Again, so yeah, Christ. Now I did not know that there was that many elements to it, and I can certainly see why this. Now that you've told me that this would be your favorite sequence, yeah, it's. I have a lot more respect from what you told me. I as you said before, though, my issue is I think the fight is very brief because it tries to strangle him, and Khan's like, "Are you for fucking real?" and just basically breaks the fucking Tin's neck in no time. It's a cool creature. It just bites the dust very quickly, and it's adding jeopardy as well. You got Jack Driscoll trying to sneak into the cave using this as a distraction and stuff. So that's pretty fucking badass. Another creature. Oh, sorry. Is there anything else you want to say before I move on to the next creature?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, like I say, it's an Elasmosaurus of its time. So if you were to base the ichthyosaur from Crystal Palace statues of what that ichthyosaur looked like, this would be the same sort of interpretation to what a plesiosaur or an Elasmosaur would have looked like as well.
No, it's pretty cool. As you said before, they keep the serpentine. They're basing it on a serpentine kind of element, so that's why it's trying to fucking constrict and strangle Khan. Something that doesn't really put up a fight so much as, oh shit, this fucker has me by the wings and he's going to tear me apart like a fucking chicken drumstick. The poor old Pteranodon does not fare fucking well in the least. And I can find the fucker now. Where are you hiding? There we go. He's like, let go of me. Look, I didn't know she was your woman. Seriously. A creature that is flying, an aerial based creature. more issues, more kind of hurdles to cross with animation?
Yeah, I mean, this is back in the day when if you wanted to animate anything in the sky, you would have to suspend it by wires. So not only are you trying to keep something stable for animation purposes, particularly stop motion, you've also got to, every time you move something, you have to adjust the cable to compensate for it. So if you think about a marionette puppet, if you've got the two uh, controls and all
Yeah.
the limbs, if you drop those limbs on one side, the whole thing will go limp. Drop them on the other side and raise the other one, it goes limp. It's the same with the stop motion puppet. The only downside is that rather than going limp, so the way you can compensate for that, it's going to be a static model. So it's just going to be tilting all over the bloody place.
My theory, and you can probably confirm this, is the minute Con gets onto him, the animators are like, right, we're welding this fucking thing to Con's forearm, and
Yeah.
that's how it's gonna fucking stay in place. So
Yeah.
that's what they done. Basically, Con is
Yeah.
essentially holding this thing upright.
Exactly. Yeah.
The design is pretty cool. I think it's a design that holds up still.
It's the classic pteranodon. Whenever people think pteranodon, this is exactly what they'll think of, and it's probably the most, and I say this loosely, paleo accurate of
Hmm.
the creatures that we've seen so far. Everything else, it's like you've got partial skeletons, you've got guesstimations in terms of size, whereas pteranodon, you always got complete skeletons, and they were all fairly big, so they had something to at least work off with this thing. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why Ray wasn't a fan of having pteranodon wings like this, because when it's flying, it's basically the equivalent of just flapping paper wings. There's no kind of like lift as it's
Yeah.
moving. So when Ray was doing pteranodons, he always put like a bat wing into there, so it made it feel like it was actually being able to lift itself up from in flight. So although he got criticised by children, he also knew that in terms of the visual effects of doing what it does, comparing it to Kong, Ray's feels like it's actually flying, whereas this is just like beating its wings and doesn't feel like there's any lift in there.
Yeah, again as well, these guys were gliders as well, so it's another kind of stretch. Would you imagine it? Cool fucking sequence again. Fay Ray, everything on this island just wants to eat. Everything on this island wants to eat every fucking thing. They want to eat each other. They want to eat the fucking humans. It's a cool sequence, and again, just that extra added difficulty of having an aerial creature. Anything you would have tweaked, or anything that you think stands out, or you think works really well, or could have been done better?
They do a lot of magic touches in this. So where Faye falls over, she'll be turned into a doll on the other side of the projection screen. The amount of interaction between the live action and the animated versions between Fay Ray and the Pteranodon as well was actually quite good as well. So I don't know if they built the full rig for the feet for it to be clawed up in, or whether they, or whether they only built to a certain portion. I would imagine they only probably built it from like the hips down. I don't think they would have made anything more than that, like they did with Kong, where it was the head, the shoulders, and the bust,
and the hand as well for.
Oh, and the hand, yeah, of course, yeah. But no, it's a good sequence. It's again, it's another short one, and I think part of it was down to because it was a very complicated shot. I mean, the Rex was a complicated shot, but that was the selling point of the movie. Whereas this and the Elasmosaur, you had so many visual effects going on. So although this wasn't as heavy as the previous scene, you're still talking about suspending an aerial character in stop motion to be animated. So that's another very technical, complicated sequence. So I can understand why they would have cut the sequence down. And also they wanted to get her off the island so they could take him to New York as well. So you have to speed up the plot somehow. But no, I do like this sequence. I like the gentle sequence as well with Kong in prior to the Pteranodon attack as well. It shows that he's not a beast.
Yeah, do you know what? We'll actually discuss the man of the hour himself now because because we've kept people waiting. They're like, when are they going to talk about the fucking monkey? I
If anyone's got questions as well, write them in the
Yeah,
comments.
no,
I want
no.
to
If
answer
anyone's
some
in the chat,
questions.
yeah, because again, Mike is essentially a fucking scholar and all this stuff. I'm just the fucking fanboy who's like, ah. But try and get that fucking picture. There we go. I don't know if it's the best picture of it, but it's a cool picture of it. Although, is that the original? I'm just after noticing something.
There's two faces. You've got long face, which is what this one is, and then you've got round face. So long face was made for the test sequence that you see very briefly with the T-Rex fight. The round face is what is pretty much seen throughout the whole film, and there's a possibility that there might have actually been a third Kong armature model made. So Peter Jackson has one, Bob Burns has another, and if there is a third one, we don't know if it got cannibalized for other projects or whether it ended up in someone's attic, basement / treasure chest at the bottom of the Atlantic or something.
So that one there in the poster is the test footage one for that was used during the T-Rex fight. And I'll recycle this older picture here. This is essentially the standard
So
kind of head.
that's the round face, yeah. So that's the one that was used for the rest of the film. Because it's weird, because when people think Kong, because this is what if you have Kong figures based on the 1933 version, you get some models that have actually got two heads, and the two heads are different sculpts, so you can intersect between the long face and the round face. But when people think of Kong as a whole, they tend to put this face on the long Kong's on head, but the face doesn't quite match because the nostrils slightly sculpted different, the brows are slightly sculpted different. So it's almost like they're misremembering two different things at the same time.
I'm actually trying to hang on a minute while I have you here. I'll try and suss out because I'm not 100% sure who he's supposed to be, which version he's supposed to be.
So just turning to the side. So that's a hybrid between long face and round face. So
Yeah.
it's got the brow and nose of round face. The teeth are fat, too far protruded forward. It's almost like he's more like a bloody predator in that particular snarling stance. But the top crown of the head, that's long face. So that's like a hybrid between the two.
Again, that's early movie maniacs, and by Christ, they took liberties with some of the designs of the stuff. So aspects of Kong, I do have a level of sympathy for Kong in the original, but not so much I think some people kind of have nostalgia goggles on. Oh, poor Khan, he fucking going into that village, stomping on people and fucking chewing up. Those fucking tribes people had nothing to do with the fuckery that was going on. He was a lot more bestial in this version. I think a lot of people have nostalgia. Again, I have sympathy for the creature, but I genuinely think over the years there has been this kind of misremembering that, he was a lot more. No, he wasn't gentle. Wasn't he so gentle? Do you agree, or do you think I'm being a cold-hearted fuck?
No, I think you're being a cold-hearted bastard.
You wouldn't be the first one to fucking say that.
No, so Kong, we're introduced to him as a beast. Literally, as Denham says, it's neither beast nor man. So the first time we see him, he's literally crashing through the trees. He kidnaps Fay Ray and he's roaring at the tribesmen as he goes back into the jungle. So that initial instance is like, yes, this is a monster. This is something that we need to rescue the damsel from. But then, as we start getting further into the film, he's protecting her from a T-Rex. He's protecting her from an elasmosaur. He's protecting her from a pteranodon. So we know that he's got that connection with her. Although I think one thing that people have romanticized over time is that they say that he's in love with Fay Ray in the sense of that it's like, oh, this is my mate. I'm going to mate with this individual. I don't think it's that same kind of love. I think it's more of a love of kind of like the same love that you would have for a pet. So if you find a kitten on the street, you fall in love with the creature because it's cute. So to him, maybe Fay Ray screams are the equivalent of a kitten crying in a corner somewhere. And especially the way he kind of like, although he removes the gown in a way that people are like, oh, he's stripping her naked. It's a sexual like rape scene, if you will. But again, he does it tenderly. He doesn't just pull the
Yeah.
clothing off and then throw her to the floor. So it's more of what's what I'm looking for here. It's more of exploration. He's trying to figure out what she is and what his feelings are towards her. And that's what, and this is what I like about Will O'Brien's animation is that he doesn't do it aggressively. The only time he's ever aggressive is when he's being defensive.
Mhm.
Every other time, he's a fairly gentle character, and it's pretty well established, not established, pretty well directed with Andy Serkis's performance. That Kong is quite sympathetic towards Fay Ray as Andaro. There we go, Andaro's character. But when he's under threat, when he's trying to protect her, he's very primordial. And yeah, I think in this film it displays it quite nicely how sympathetic you can feel for this character. Every time I watch this film, I cry because I know what's coming. I know it's kind of like he's been thrust into a situation that he has no place being, but it's just accentuates kind of like how greedy and destructive humanity is in terms of we find something of entertainment value and we rip it away from its homeland, bring it to Broadway, stick it on stage for it to perform in a tutu and a brass band. And then when it all goes tits up, we're like, oh, this is a tragedy. This creature has just killed so many people. Well, if you left it where it was, maybe you want to do this in the first place. Maybe you didn't go to that stinking island in the first place for a freaking documentary. Maybe you won't be in this predicament.
My question is, but what was Denham's plan? We never got to see the show. Were people that bored in 1933 that they just stick around? Oh, it's a really big monkey, cool. Like, what was the plan? Like even in Mighty Joe Young, at least Joe fucking holds up your one on the fucking turntable, playing the piano. This dude's just like, what the fuck? What if he took a piss in the middle of the stage? What if he like? It's like, oh my god, the reviews are terrible. They're literally shit.
Kind of like, I mean, this is what makes me laugh. It's like he's there to film a film, so the idea of him coming back with a film about this thing is one thing. But yes, dragging him back to Hollywood, not Hollywood, to New York, to effectively put him on display. It's like you're not going to train him to do tricks. He's literally just going to stand there in chains while people ogle at him. So yeah, it was a doomed idea to fail from the start. I don't think Denham really thought the whole thing through. I think he was more bothered about the fact of people are coming to see this thing, therefore it's bums on seats, money in the bank. But yeah, no, it's a weird one.
Again, I'm going to say something controversial, and Mike is going to want to fucking bottle me. I love the original King Kong. It's a fucking classic. I love this version of Kong. I have more of an affinity for Jackson's King Kong because they delve more into the fact he's the last of his species. And if you know anything about primates, particularly gorillas, they are a intimately social animal, and it can be detrimental to their mental health. And I think like the scene where he's just sitting on a cliff face looking out at the sunset with Anne in his hand, and you just get the feeling that this is the most peace and serenity he's had so long. I think that does that so well. I'm not shitting on this, and I do realize it was 1933, but I just feel there's definitely what you say is actually probably the best explanation I've never thought about. He's like fucking Coco the gorilla with Snowball the
Yeah.
kitten at a zoo. He's like, ooh, he's just playing with this thing. It's his first kind of. That's it. I've never gotten the whole romanticization thing. I've never bought it. I've never believed it. I'm not shitting on it. If that's your viewpoint, that's grand. I just think it's done. If you want to go with that, it's done far better in the Jackson movie.
Yeah. Jackson's version of it reads between the lines. So what 1933 does is they list it out in black and white. This is good. This is bad. The man gets the girl, and the beast is killed off. Whereas Jackson's version, it's there is no good and evil. There's perception on what is right and wrong. And in Kong's case, it's literally a case of we are seeing that deeper meaning of what it's like to be the last of a species, what it's like to be alone on an island where everything is out to try and kill you, hurt you, or just basically make your life a living hell. And I like that about Jackson's version. And there's a part of me that's like, but it's too long. But I do appreciate it. And it's not like I would say, oh, I'd rather this scene be shorter. Because in modern cinema, in modern cinema storytelling, audiences will now be able to process that kind of information. If they did that back in 1933, people would have said, this is too much. I don't buy it, and just stormed out. Whereas in today's audiences, we have the mental capacity to actually understand and process that kind of storytelling. And especially with the techniques that we use to make the film, would have been much more suited for that rather than trying to do it in stop motion in the 30s.
Yeah. I think Jackson had the advantage, as you've pointed out. It's a contemporary movie. He's done a lot more. The fucking if we might go into a bit of a side tangent here. I'm not going to keep you too long because I know you got stuff to do and places to go and stuff. One thing I always thought is like the sequence on the ship goes on. It's the alien and aliens effect. You want to get to know the crew, so when they're picked off, you feel bad.
Yeah.
Does it need to be that long though? I don't think so. I think it's like we kept that length of the ship sequence, but we lost the attack of the Ferructosaurus, the Scorpiopedes, and that one animatronic, that terror bird and stuff. That shit should have been kept in, and you should have fucking cut down. That's just my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there were some characters in that ship's crew that I did feel for, but compared to the original, where you got introduced to Jack Driscoll, Fay Ray, and Anne Darrow, and what's his name? What's the other guy's name now? Carl Denham. There we go.
Carl Denham.
They were the only three characters you needed to care about. Everyone else was just kind of like side fodder. So it doesn't matter if you lost your entire sailing crew. It was tragic losing all those people, but it's not really what the story's about. Whereas Jackson's, yes, it's nice to kind of like develop those characters, but then you have to ask yourself, but are we here to see those characters, or are we here to see the title film star Kong? And I would rather have seen more of Kong than the ship sailors. But then I can imagine that other people are going to be flipping that on its head and say, well, actually, I'd prefer to see the sailors over seeing more Kong. We've got plenty of Kong, but we want to see more human development on this, which, is fine. It's entirely up to the individuals to make their own mind up on what they prefer as a story concept. But for me personally, I would prefer less of a backstory on some of the human characters, and would prefer more mythology and more coming from the island and its inhabitants.
Creepy McGee says more Lumpy. Jackson was brilliant as Lumpy the cook. He was cool. and the fucking the Chinese guy as well. I was like, Jackson done the Indiana, basically, as far as kind of wokeness and progressive culture. Jackson with that movie done the Indiana Jones getting your hat out under the door before it fucking shut with that movie, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, no, I like Jackson's movie. This is weird. I have weird headcanon with this now. I always look okay. It's not a great movie, and it's not a sequel, and it's nice to see even back in the 30s, studios are like, let's crank out a fucking sequel and make one quick as fuck, regardless of quality. Son of Con, squandered potential, I think. The things I like is it's a redemption story of Carl Denham, and then you have Mighty Joe Young. I like to think that the character in Mighty Joe Young is Carl Denham. He just changed his name because all the people got killed, and he finally gets to save the fucking gorilla. You know the end of Mighty Joe Young, where he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, we're gonna get Joe back to Africa." I like to think that's Carl Denham's redemption of
Yeah.
like, oh, fucking. That's the way I see it. I don't know. What do you think of its sequel and Joe Young? What are your thoughts on them?
So the sequel was unfortunately a product of greed. When the producers and the director saw how well Kong had done for its time, and don't forget this is pre when the concept of a blockbuster was a thing, they wanted more. So rather than re-releasing the film over and over again, they decided to follow up with the sequel, Son of Kong. From what Ray told me, Willis O'Brien was not happy on the production of this film.
Hadn't he lost a family member as well at the time?
Yes, so I can't remember in what phase of the film it was, but his wife at the time suffered with mental health issues, and they had two sons. She took a shotgun, killed the two boys, and then killed herself. So one of the photos that you can see sometimes online is a photo of Willis O'Brien animating one of the dinosaurs, which I think is from Son of Kong, and it's got 4 tears through it, and that's him looking at that photo, reminding himself of how tragic his life was at that point. That he tore the photo up.
That fucking sucked.
Mm,
Because the
yeah.
man, like, so on top of getting this fucking shit show of a job,
Mhm.
to have that happen in the background,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
lucky of any fucking film at all. Like, even
To be honest, his
yeah,
entire career is worthy of a discussion in itself because he started on such a big high, and then after Michael Joe Young, his life just went to shit. Not through himself, just literally Hollywood just being Hollywood.
didn't he get screwed over by fucking RKO when they were debating the Toho Frankenstein versus King Kong movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He was trampled over by Hollywood. There's a part of me that really hopes that someday there'll be a biography film about him because again, without Willis O'Brien, you wouldn't have Ray Harryhausen, you wouldn't have Phil Tippett, you wouldn't have a good probably 50 to 80% of science fiction, fantasy, and horror films out there because without his inspiration, without his concept, without his stories, I don't think we'd even have half of what we got.
Yeah,
It was really sad. And
that that
going back
sucks.
to Son of Kong because it's a very depressing subject. So the film was rushed out. Uh, O'Brien wasn't happy with the film's quality. The script was very subpar. I mean, the animation doesn't suffer in that sense, which is fantastic. But yeah, in terms of the consistency from what you had with King Kong to Son of Kong, it was very obvious that this was just like a cash grab opportunity. There was no kind of like love for the project as there was for the previous one.
Was there, for me? Yeah, it was definitely a major step down. I did like the fight between the bear and Conson. I thought that was cool. Just him wrestling a bear. I
It
liked
was
it.
cool. It was cool, except that O'Brien got given notes to make it more friendly for kids. because Joe, Son of Kong, is as child effectively. So the fight scene in itself was fine up until the point it did silly things like the bear is attacking him and he crawls out from underneath the bear's legs while the bear's still fighting a fucking wall or something. And there's another shot where the bear pushes him down and he hits his wall, and then his eyes
This
rotate round
bumps his
like a
head.
fucking cartoon
Yeah,
character.
fucking,
Yeah,
fucking
it's
Looney
like, for
Tune shit.
fuck's sake. It's like, Jesus Christ, talk about massive difference in film quality. It's just like, oh God, yeah. I mean, I get it. You know, if you've got something successful, you want to ride that wave. I get it. But to get it out in the same year as 1933, it's not even like they were in like a 2-year production before then releasing Son of Kong. It was literally, they dropped King Kong and then they had like 6 to 9 months or something to make Son of Kong before the end of 1933. It was just like that much of a rush.
I know they used the Stryakosaur, but I'm sure there was other creatures they could have fucking utilized and made a more interesting fucking thing.
Well, they cannibalized the Brontosaur for the sea serpent. So the animatronic that was in the lake sequence in the first film, they stripped the skin back and turned it into a sea serpent, and that was at the end of Son of Kong. I think the Brontosaur with insect eyes was a new model. I know the cave bear was a new model because I think that was supposed to be in creation as well. And apart from that, I don't think there was any other creatures. It's like it was a very kind of like creatureless movie.
I think they only get to the island by the last 20 minutes.
Most of it is you literally spend half the film like on a circus and then the other half on the island. That's it. It's like there's and it doesn't even feel like you're on the island for like a good chunk of the time. And to top it all off as well, they now say, "Oh, the island's sinking." So you've now got this ticking clock of that bloody happening. So it's like crying out loud.
I do like that that idea was incorporated into Jackson's movie as well.
Yes.
If you read the natural history that the island is sinking. Yeah. Moving on to a far superior movie, and I'm going with quick discussion on this. I'll let you plug your kind of wares as well because I know you've stuff you want to do, and I know you got places to be. Mighty Joe Young, fantastic fucking movie, way better than what had come before. And as I see it, it's like again, my head it's Carl Denham. He's trying to make amends. What's your thoughts? Give us a rundown on your thoughts.
I think Mighty Joe Young was made because of the backlash from Son of Kong. They wanted that success again. I can't remember who wrote the story for this one because the original Kong was written by Ruth Rose and
Edgar Wallace. Was it Edgar Wallace?
That's it. There you go. Yeah. But I think Mighty Joe Young was written by someone different, and I got a feeling that it was more of a Willis O'Brien project than it was Cooper's. But it did feel like, because of the way Son of Kong had gone down, that this was kind of like, right, okay, we're going to make a film properly now about a giant medium-sized gorilla. And yeah, it's quite a fun film. It's got some really good action sequences. Again, it's got some really good complicated shots for the 1940s. It's Ray Harryhausen's very first film establishment. He animated a good 90% of the shots, if I remember right. And even what's the word I'm looking for? In the remake from the 90s, him and what was the name? Terry Moore make a small cameo appearance. And what Ray wanted to do was, because he was animating the Joe puppet in the 40s, he wanted, during the restaurant sequence, for Joe, the animatronic, to pick up Ray and play with him a little bit before putting him back down again. But because of health reasons or something, not health reasons, sorry, safety concerns, there we go, they didn't do it. So it was like, God, that would have been an amazing opportunity to do that.
that would have been good. That would have been cool. That would have been cute. I love Joe is fucking badass. The bit where the lions get out of the display case and he all started, and he just said, "Fuck you!" He just tossing these lions like they're kittens. He's like, "Get the." You ever have a cat jump on your back and just like, "Wow!" He's just like, "Fuck you." Tosses it. Again, great movie. If you haven't seen it, I kind of look again. Sonicon, there's a lot of issues with it. I still have a soft spot for it. I kind of see these as a nice kind of little or trilogy of kind of like fucking and they're cool. Before I let you plug your wares and stuff, how big of an influence has this monkey had in cinema, in your view?
Unquestionably, it's everywhere. If it's not through the influence with Toho, because Kong is effectively part of that universe as well, it's a household name, and it's been a household name since the 30s. So we're talking about nearly 100 years of something. So even if you haven't seen the film, everyone knows the name King Kong. Everyone knows that it's a giant ape. You might have different versions of how big of an ape we're talking about, but they know that it's not your average silverback gorilla in the Congo. And it's not just the Kong as a character as well. It's the way that music is written for film. Max Steiner's score is a massive influence on most of the movie score industry, from people like Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Michael Giacchino, for example. Max Steiner is a core influence there. You've got the way that the effects are done. That's, as I've said many times before now, it's bled out into films of high quality and low quality with stop motion effects from people like Ray Harryhausen, Phil Tippett, Jim Apatow, countless others. And then you've got the actual performance side of it as well. So the acting, these are actors that would have been fresh to sound. It was the first sound movie, well, one of the first sound movies, I should say, of its time, because everything pre-Kong was all silent movie stuff. So this not only would have been the first sound movie, it would have been the first sound movie with heavy visual effects and a score as dramatic as this. So without Kong, we might not have cinema as it is today. And we certainly wouldn't have anything like home cinema, streaming, surround sound systems, special effects industry. We wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for this movie. I think if Kong didn't go through, I would not imagine what the world would be like today without it, basically. And we owe everyone from that production, from technicians to the directors, producers, the writers, special effects, actors, T-boys, for crying out loud. They all played the part in that film, and it's a legacy that's never going to get forgotten.
That's you fucking hit the nail on the head. The cinematic landscape would be fucking savagely different without this movie. Dude, thanks a million for coming by. I appreciate it, because I know you've got a busy schedule. Speaking of, where can people check out your work, and what have you in the pipeline, and what are you working on? What do you want people to check out?
So you can find me on Instagram, which is Mike Tharme, all one word. I'm on Twitter as well, but I'm not as active as I used to be, but you can still follow me on there if you want to. I don't have, I do have Facebook, but it's a private account, so you can't really find it on there. But you can find my work on animationtoolkit.com. So whether that be on social, whether that be through the website, you'll be able to find me on there. If you are interested in stop motion, you can always reach out to me via that channel as well, because I'm more than happy to explain, talk, or even advise on what to do for your own stop motion projects. And just to remind people as well, that the Ray Harryhausen Foundation do have a short film awards category where you can actually, if you win the category per se, you get an award from the foundation, which is a film reel with all of Ray's creatures in the little holes. So if you're interested in stop motion, if you're wanting to make a little film of some kind, that would be the perfect place to submit your film, because as much as I love Morph and Wallace and Gromit and every other kind of like a character out there, stop motion creatures are just as important, I think, You can deal with dialogue. You can deal with circumstances without dialogue. You can deal with action without having to worry about, oh, is this person looking accurate enough? Your imagination is your own limitation. So yeah, it's stop motion creatures are very freeing, which is why I specialize in it.
Again, Mike, thanks a million for coming. You're an absolute fucking legend. Check out his stuff. You done a cool little kind of animation. It didn't. You didn't get to complete it, but is the trailer still up on
The
YouTube?
trailer's still on my YouTube channel, yeah. So if you type in wildlife on Mars, it should. I think the most recent post would have been 2019. I think it was the last upload. It might even be 2020 actually. So yeah, because of COVID, production stopped halfway through, and when I came back to it all, the whole thing was just kind of like messed up because it's been sat in a hot room for the best part of a year and a half. So eventually, I will come around to remaking it. But you need studio, you need funds, you need a lot of stuff. So maybe I'll do a GoFundMe at some point in the future. But again, I need a team to do that. So let's we'll see. We'll get there with it all. So what's Gen Review saying? Awesome stream, guys. Mike, my youngest son thinks you are the coolest. Well, I'm that average.
You're American to think anyone who's foreign is fucking cool. Go run with it. Run with it. Again, I've known Mike for a while. Absolute fucking legend. I remember I was doing my stop motion spectacular stream, and the dude just, hey, dude, fucking gent, nicest guy ever. Check out his stuff. Again, the dude is uber fucking talented, and I'm going to leave links to his socials and stuff in the description below. Mike, thanks again. I know you're busy. You're an absolute legend, and thanks a million. Myself, tomorrow, Mike, you're going to get a laugh out of this. I'm going to be reviewing my newest figure, which is the Dolph Lundgren He-Man. So keep your eyes out for that. But Mike, thanks again. And also big thanks to everyone who stopped in the chat. Creepy McGee, my gorgeous girlfriend, obviously I'd be fucking castrated if I didn't mention her. I read books, Strange Monkeys reviews, Worm T17, Jesus, I'd get that looked at. Horror Cat Dad, and Pugwall as well. And whoever stopped in, I know we had a couple of people being a bit voyeuristic, but thanks a million. And most of all, thanks to Mike.
Before we shut off, actually, I have a small story I want to share. And I hope everyone's going to get a laugh out of it, because I always do. So when I was being mentored by Ray, he told me there was an occasion that him and his wife went on holiday, and they decided to go to what was supposed to be the islands where Kong was supposed to have lived. And they got to one of these islands, and they got off the boat, and Ray sees this native character, this person on the dock. So in his wisdom, he walks up to this person, and he reiterates the line from the film. So he says, "Bala, Bala, Kong Nadahi." And this native looks at him, like really confused, and he says, "What are you talking about?" in plain English. So the island natives have all been converted to Christianity, so they were all speaking either English or American English. But what was also interesting is that only like maybe a couple decades before, the tribes of the island were all cannibals. So yeah, he missed a trick with that one.
Jesus, he's lucky. He could have been in the fucking stew pot for that. Dude, thanks again. You're an absolute fucking legend and a star. Please, guys, I implore you, check out Mike's channel, check out his stuff. I'll leave the socials in the descriptions below. Thanks a million who stopped in. And again, Mike, thanks a million. Everyone, have a good night.
No
Take care. Bye now.
I know. Oh, yeah.